weather are Thanksgiving and Christmas. So while the zoo will be closed to the public Christmas Day, we're open all of the others around it. Staff still come in. Obviously, animal care staff come in, and we make sure the animals are still well taken care of that day. There's a manager here, but we try to make sure everybody gets a holiday in there. Nobody has to work, too many hours, and it's not too much pressure on anybody over the next, couple weeks.
Gotcha. So coordinating all of that, I'm sure, is exciting because everybody wants to be with their family and all of that. So
you got the family members, you got the whatever, you got to have a manager around, and everybody has to, needs to be able to use their appropriate time off. So yeah, it becomes your schedules look like someone's playing Tetris with different blocks and colors and.
Sure. Excellent. Well, Jay, I know that the zoo recently had its annual Wild Lights event. How did that go? What was it like this year?
Well, it was gorgeous. I mean, the team has always did a beautiful job of setting it up. I know there was a news article again about it at one point. The first weekend, first Friday, and the tree lighting and stuff in downtown Bloomington, I think affected our numbers a little better. That Saturday, we had great turnout. We had like over 1,000 people come in. Lots of like really good, interest, like, in the gift shop and concessions and stuff. So it was a really good, fun night for everybody. This past weekend, our numbers were not great. But it was cold. It had been raining all day. And we still had I think 250 people come out Saturday night, which really surprised us for how miserable the weather was. But there were some dedicated folks that were going to come and see some Christmas lights in a family-safe environment.
Nice. Good deal. Always a fun event. Hopefully weather cooperates a little better next year. I remember that all that rain we got, that did make it kind of sloppy and just kind of nasty. So
yeah, it's just, who wants to go out in that? A few people braved it, which we were very thankful for, but overall, it's understandable that it wasn't the same impact we had last year.
No question. We'll look forward to it. And Jay, I know that you've had some activity going on at the zoo here recently. A new edition, a Red Wolf, a female Red Wolf edition. Tell me about this.
So, we've had red wolves here. We are part of the AZA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Red Wolf Recovery Program. They are critically endangered, if not the most critically endangered carnivore in the United States and areas. They are a very, very carefully managed program. And as such, the folks that manage it really want to see pairs that are put together successful at reproducing, because this is a reproduction and then a reintroduction recovery program is what the intent is over in the east side of the country. And so we had, a couple years ago, we brought in our female honey bun and introduced her to our male moon pie. And while they got along very well, over the past 2 years, while we saw reproductive behavior, there were no offspring. And so the management team and group decided that they wanted to do a swap of some females. So our female went to a facility in South Carolina, and we brought in a new female. Her name is Magnolia, and she came in from Washington State a couple weeks ago. So she's quarantined right now in a holding building near that, and we're going to get her through that quarantine period and then introduce her to Mr. Moon Pie, and we'll hopefully get through that successfully and then see if, this might be a more successful reproductive pairing, because it's every pup, every offspring is critical to this population. I don't know the total numbers, but it is shockingly low. We're heading for California historic condor, low levels here, and they require our intervention and help.
So when you have maybe an unsuccessful pair like that, do they do testing on the female and the male to make sure they're healthy and they're able to reproduce and those sorts of things, Jay?
Yes. So we actually did. It's interesting that you asked that question, because every one of our animals, we try to make sure that we organize and arrange an annual physical exam. In a case like this, where animals should be reproductive and they're not, we make sure that that's part of it. And so the male actually Moon Pie had his annual physical exam a few weeks ago, actually just before the new female arrived, and he is, as far as we can all tell, healthy and reproductively viable and intact. And then to get out of quarantine, Magnolia needed a vet exam, and actually her vet exam was just the other day. And they did the same thing. They did a full reproductive scope, and from what we can tell, without going into a fully invasive, kind of panel and stuff, through ultrasounds and blood work, she does appear to be, reproductively sound as well. So we're gonna cross our fingers and see what happens. And
so when you introduce a new pair like you have, Tell me about that process. You mentioned right now she's in quarantine. Speak to what the getting her introduced to moon pie looks like, and what just kind of what that process is for you and the folks at the zoo there. What's all that about?
Theirs is a little different just because of space and where we can house carnivores. But this is the process we would do when we bring in any new animal. So if an animal comes in and it's going to be part of a social group, we'll bring them into quarantine. They spend, depending on the species, it's usually 30 days, and then they're under observation. We watch for behavioral concerns. There's fecal testing. There's all the things. There's a shipment or like a pre-quarantine exit exam, like what just happened with Magnolia, to make sure there's nothing we're missing. And then through that process, we will generally, with veterinary approval, start introducing like scents and sounds if it's viable. And in this case, it is because with our holding spaces, Magnolia is actually in the wolf holding building, but she has doors and barriers up. So while she doesn't have physical access to see or interact with Moon Pie, they can hear each other and they can smell each other. So they're already like, they know the other wolf is already there and around. What we're going to do, it's actually, zoos do this all the time. We use what's called a howdy door. And we will take like a permanent, solid door, and we'll replace it with something that is mesh or perforated or clear. And then that'll be the next step so they can visually see one another. And we watch very carefully for behavioral signs of, any type of aggression, receptivity. When we see that, we'll start then making, and any introductions would be in controlled environments, super saturated with resources and food and things to do with staff and veterinarians on hand, just in case it doesn't go as well, as we necessarily hope, with the option to, okay, do we separate? Do we try again? There's a lot of consulting with experts. There's all sorts of instruction guides to AZA and everything out there and the best practices to go through. But a lot of it comes down to how do those two animals feel about one another? So we monitor that very, very carefully to make sure that it's not just a open the door and here you go, here's your new friend, because that could just go bad.
Yeah, and this has me thinking about. So we foster. I've told folks this before. We foster dogs through the pet adoption group here in the community, and it when you take a dog to meet a family that maybe has another dog, you want that controlled. But the nice thing about dogs is you can have them on a leash, and so like something doesn't go well, you can just pull them back and try again. You can try different tactics. You probably can't do that with a red wolf. You can't put it on a leash.
It's tougher. So what we do is we set up the environment as best we can and figure out, okay, like, can they get away from one another? Can we insert a visual barrier? And then we'll do things like make sure we have like air horns, maybe like a CO2 fire extinguisher. So if we needed to startle them and then go and herd one inside and separate them. So we would set it up that without a leash, we would have that. But it's a good analogy. Our Rottweiler rescue I've been with for years, we actually have created a decompression plan and documents for introducing a new dog to like the home to give it those gradual steps. Because I think people don't realize you don't just throw two animals together and assume they're going to be great, because there's so many variables going on with them. So we do exactly that. We come up with decompression and introduction plans for every animal we would introduce to another one.
Yeah, and so with that said, do you know much about like the characteristics of this wolf you're bringing in? Is she submissive? Is she dominant? Is she playful? Like, what do you know about this wolf that you're bringing in, Jay?
They described her when she came in as kind of like, inquisitive. She is very, very curious, but she's very sure of herself. Our last female was that way as well. It's funny because the first week she was here, the team came and they're like, we're not sure she's leaving the one den room. Like, she's really quiet. She's not doing a lot. And she was eating and doing everything she needed to. She was just so quiet. Well, something changed and she got comfortable. And now she's kind of working on systematically dismantling our holding building and getting into everything. Because, they don't understand why they're in. They want to be able to get out. They want to be able to interact. Well, we have to monitor them for health and safety and stuff. Like, she sort of is like, okay, I'm comfortable now. Now I'm going to take this place apart. So she is definitely confident. So we'll see how that goes.
That's funny.
Moon Pie was used to a more dominant female out there. She pretty much ran the show. So I don't think that'll necessarily be a surprise for him. We'll hope it goes well. We'll keep everyone posted.
When do you hope to see all this take place there, Jay?
So we're going to start this week. We are actually working on getting that introduction panel, that howdy door installed. And then so once we get that installed with veterinary approval that she is cleared from quarantine, that's when we'll start doing those, like on the other side of that howdy door introductions, let them see each other, let them smell each other, because there'll be like either holes or mesh that they can actually have more contact through there, and we'll just start monitoring it carefully. But we're hoping with vet approval that those first initial behind the scenes ones will be in the next week or so.
And for a lot of folks out there that may bristle at the idea of a zoo and an animal in captivity, this program, I think, really exemplifies why, institutions like yours, and I'm sure many you've been with over the years, Jay, are important to wildlife and conservation and those sorts of things.
I mean, there are. I over my career, I've heard you hear this all the time. Well, I don't like zoos because, or blah blah blah, or there's not necessarily an understanding. Here we have, like, this is one of two projects. We are also part of the Puerto Rican crested toad reintroduction project, where we have, like, a breeding center, behind the scenes here on site. But those animals, like, we work with the reproduction team, and then they are taken by the team and they are reintroduced into the wild, where these populations are in decline from human intervention or pollution or whatever. The red wolves, like I was referencing the California condors, these are ones that basically have lost in competing with human beings. Traffic, chemicals, like, overhunting, all of these things. One of the biggest problems that we deal with, and you see a lot of times in red wolves, is like traffic, because they will get hit very regularly. And there's actually a big fundraising project going on in the Carolinas right now in one area where they're known to have several of them for a giant interchange, but one of those wildlife crossings. They're going to restructure the whole interchange to create a wildlife crossing so that the wolves have and other animals have the ability to cross, like, these barriers that risk their lives every time they do to get to the other side or to go forage or hunt. And so it's really critical that people understand, like, this is what these projects are, but the numbers have dwindled so low that without our help and specific protections from U.S. Fish and Wildlife in partnership with groups like AZA and zoos, there wouldn't be any at all.
Heartbreaking stuff, but great efforts, it sounds like, afoot to help this effort out, it sounds like.
It is. I mean, that's part of why we're here, is, like, conservation, education, and, doing what we can for wildlife everywhere.
How optimistic are you these things will help this population recover, Jay?
I can't predict with this one. I don't know a lot about red wolves. There's a similar one with Mexican wolves. Both the red wolf and the Mexican wolves are U.S. Fish and Wildlife managed. There was a lot of cautious success with the California condor, and the numbers that have, kind of bounced back from, it was like 7 or 8 animals left alive years ago. And then I know that one of the orc species that was reintroduced over in its native, habitat in the Middle East has been successful efforts. So, like, there is hope that these types of efforts will work and help with repopulation. But it also means we have to fix what's wrong on the other side or here. So if the wolves aren't protected, the wolves are being hunted, or they're just being, like, run over constantly, and we don't fix those problems, we can keep putting all the animals we want back into the wild, and it's not going to help. So it's a double-pronged approach where we're going to work on the populations and then work with educating and seeing what changes we can make within the country or wherever we are to make sure that they've got a chance at success.
It's awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff, Jay. Where do folks go to learn about all things Miller Park Zoo?
We have our page on the City of Bloomington website. We also have all our social media, Instagram and Facebook, that they can follow. You can also find information on the Miller Park Zoological Society's social media and website.
Jay Pratte, Executive Director of the Miller Park Zoo in Bloomington, is my guest on the Zoom call today. More to come with Jay on The Morning Show. WHOW.
It's no secret that employers are having a difficult time hiring qualified personnel, whether full or part-time. The Miller Media Group wants to help you, the employer, to find the candidates you're looking for. That's why we've created IllinoisJobPost.com. That's IllinoisJobPost.com. This website is part of a broad radio and internet employment campaign available through the Miller Media Group. Contact your account manager or email sales@randyradio.com for more information. IllinoisJobPost.com is where we put the power of radio and the internet to attract prospective candidates.
The only competition that really matters is you versus you. And with the performance of Veltima fungicide from BASF, you can take your best results even further. Veltima fungicide is on your side to out-yield the competition by an average of 7 bushels per acre, but you've never been average. Beat your own record, get every bushel you deserve, and make this your best season yet with Veltima fungicide from BASF. Always read and follow label directions.
WHOW is Central Illinois' ag station, and that includes providing farmers information on how the commodity markets close each day and week. I'm Todd Gleason from Illinois Public Media, University of Illinois Extension, inviting you to hear the daily closing market report weekday afternoons at 5:06, and on Saturdays tune in for Commodity Week with a review of the week's markets at 8:30 in the morning, all on WHOW AM, FM, and streamed online.
Are you wanting to learn more about your health and wellness options in Central Illinois? Visit stealthwellness.com or click on my banner ad at dewittdailynews.com. Let me, Dr. Bill Byers, show you some simple, under-the-radar ways to improve and take control of your health.
Netflix buffering, YouTube spinning, devices not connecting, Zoom calls dropping. It's frustrating. Let's end your frustration by signing up for fiber internet in Clinton. Click the Connexus icon at dewittdailynews.com.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, a good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. My guest on the Zoom call today, Jay Pratte, Executive Director of the Miller Park Zoo in Bloomington. Jay, I know you've got some new guest opportunities you're excited to roll out for folks. Tell us about this. What's going on?
So our team decided to put this together. We've been working on it for a while. As always, we have our giant Galapagos tortoise feedings. Those have been available to guests for some times, where they can call the zoo or get on the website and do some scheduling for that. But ever since we brought in our giant anteaters, Chili and Arnaud, they have been getting along very well, and they have proven to be very interactive with staff and a few VIP behind-the-scenes experiences. So we have actually now created a program for anteater feedings. So now guests will have the opportunity, if they would like, where they can get on the website, they can call us and track down, those links for how they can plan to come in and have their own anteater feedings. And for a little extra, they can actually get a painting. They'll use their tongue and food dye and whatever else. It's actually really cool. And you can walk away with your own genuine anteater painting from your experience.
That's funny. What do anteaters eat? I feel like that's maybe a self-explanatory question, but what do they eat, Jay?
So, they do focus, on insects larvae. A lot of times you'd see them with those claws, just dismembering either termite mounds, ripping apart rotten logs to get at the insects, the grubs, everything that's in there. Here, while we do bring in and have a variety of different types of insects, we offer all of our insectivore species. They are fed it's actually a very balanced manufactured diet that we can crumble, we can break up, we can offer to them. And they also get that with a variety of insects that we order in weekly that come to the zoo for all of our species. And then they're actually really great. They've got some favorites. They love they've torn apart pumpkins. They really enjoy a grapefruit or an orange. They'll puncture it with their middle claw, and then their tongue will go in, and they'll just work on that for a while. So they're really big fans along those lines. So we give them as much variety as we can, but it's really focused on the protein of an insect-based diet.
And you talked about that AZA certification. Do you have to run this type of thing by them and kind of outline what you're going to do and safety of the animal and all of that?
So we don't do specifically unless they ask, but there are whole sections in the accreditation guidelines and in our application policy that ask about interactive opportunities for guests. And so we outline our programs in there. We relay them. We generally tend to model what we do off of other existing AZA programs to make sure it's safe. It's gone through our veterinarians. They're fine with it. So we do make sure we fully disclose all of our activities, to AZA. They don't necessarily monitor them unless there's something that might come in violation or there's a complaint or a concern or whatever else. But this one has been pretty successful so far, and everybody's been very much enjoying it. But it's on our roster, it's out there publicly, and it's part of our AZA package as well.
Are anteaters then pretty? You talked about yours being pretty receptive to people, so they're kind of mild mannered then, and that's not something you worry about.
They are generally mild mannered. There's two things that one I didn't know and one I did. If you ever get to Google giant anteater claws, they actually walk on their knuckles. And then what they've got folded up underneath are these giant velociraptor-like claws that when they unfurl them, they can actually like tear apart logs, clay termite mounds, but the word disembowel has been used because they are huge, sharp claws, and an anteater will rear up and flare those claws and have been known to try and defend themselves in their native habitat from carnivores like jaguars and the like. Little known, those tiny little beak-like mouths, they can roar, and it almost sounds like a little miniature lion is in the building.
Really?
It's not a sound you would have ever guessed would come out of an anteater.
Huh. Interesting. So do you have to kind of be selective on who you let have access to them?
So people can, like, they call in and they set up the appointment, and that we do limit the numbers of people and we do limit the ages for safety. No, we don't go in with the anteaters. It's actually through a barrier, but you get the feeding tubes, you get the full experience, and you've got a trained staff member there who's telling you about the animals, answering questions. This is not one where we let people in with the animals. That would just be far too unpredictable. Unlike the tortoises. Nobody's going to get mauled by a giant Galapagos tortoise.
Sounds good, Jay. A lot of excitement there. Again, where do folks go to learn about all things Miller Park Zoo?
Our website is on the City of Bloomington webpage. Our social media, Instagram and Facebook, of course, for Miller Park Zoo, and the Miller Park Zoological Society's social media and website as well.
Jay Pratte, Miller Park Zoo Executive Director. Network News on the way.